Welcome to the Connectable podcast.
The Connectable podcast starts in 3, 2, 1.
All right, Deb, we have another teacher in the house. Brian, I don't think we told you this, but Deb is also a teacher. I'm not a teacher, so I feel very out of place. I'm usually not the smartest one in the room, but definitely for this time for sure, I know I'm not. So, it's gonna be fun. Yeah, he's shaking his head, but he hasn't talked to us that long. We just met him. It's true, Brian. It's true. I'm usually the dumbest one on the show.
Every day in class, I realize how much I don't know. So I think that's a good thing as a teacher, right? You're constantly learning, and they got questions for you all the time in high school where you're like, all right, let me check and get back to you, or I don't know all the answers. So,
all right, well, I feel a little bit better about that because we have a ton of questions for you. But before we get into that, I'm going to introduce our guest, Deb. Today's guest is Brian Asher. He's also known as the World Hiker. He's a teacher, he's a runner, he's a hiker, he's a traveler. He does a lot. So welcome, Brian. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Sometimes a lot of times, I feel like more and more, Deb, this has happened where we have guests. It's called Connectable. Our whole goal is to create connections through relatable conversations. And sometimes we have people on, like a couple episodes ago, we had one of Deb's really good friends on. Other times we'll have people that we've just met 5 minutes before we started recording. And that's the case with you. Like, we just met you. But I became aware of who you were because of the San Juan Unified Student podcast. They had tagged myself and my friend Kevin Bracey in a couple of posts because of a different podcast that we do. And so we kind of started following them. And then one of the episodes not too long ago was yourself. And I'm like, oh, this guy sounds awesome. We need to have him on our podcast because he's clearly understands connection because you're connecting with the entire world. So, that's how we're connected. And now I'm gonna kind of shut up, and I want to hear more about like how you grew up, where you started, and how you got to the place where you're at today.
Yeah, I grew up here in Sacramento. I went to the same high school where I'm teaching right now, which is kind of hard to believe. So some of my colleagues are my former teachers. About half of them are still there. It's a decent school. It's called Rio Americano High School here in Sacramento, and grew up in the area. And it's funny how life comes full circle sometimes. So grew up here, never traveled at all, basically didn't even leave the state for the first 18 years of my life, besides a couple visits to family in Washington and things. And never thought about going to other countries, other places. And I ended up playing a little bit of college baseball in Georgia. And for me, that was almost like another country, going to the deep South and going down there for a couple of years, and then came back and finished up at Sacramento State here. And then my brother started kind of talking to me about, he did a couple study abroads, and that just kind of opened up the idea of possibly going to another country. And so that's revolutionized my world since I stepped foot in Costa Rica when I was 21 years old. And I was like, wow, what have I been missing? It's the excitement just of getting up out of bed every day, the adventure, the newness, the fear, the anxiety, all of the above. It just made me feel so alive. And that's been something for the last 10 or 15 years that's been a huge priority for me, is to visit different countries. And I've been teaching abroad for 7 years. I came back, and I've been teaching here in the US for about 6 or 7 years. So I've been teaching English abroad. Now I teach high school Spanish here at Rio Americano, and try to stay as active as I can. I played soccer, basketball, and baseball growing up, played 3 sports, and then worked my way kind of into more outdoor stuff when I got a job as a backpacking guide in Colorado, and been doing a lot of outdoor and individual sports and running and hiking and things ever since.
Wow. That's a lot in a short amount of time. That's awesome, man.
That's pretty good, but we still have lots of questions.
a ton of questions. Yeah, no, and I wanted to say this. I should have mentioned this before we started recording, but I saw that you taught at Rio, and my wife actually graduated from Rio as well. I don't know what year you graduated, but yeah, she's
2003.
Okay, she was 07. So no, probably would have just missed each other, huh?
Yeah, probably just missed her. She was 4 years younger than me.
Yeah. So I'll have to let her know, because I mentioned the name, and she's like, oh, I wonder if we went to high school together. I said, well, I'll find out once we record this podcast. So I'll let her know. No, but that's awesome, man. Go ahead, Deb. I just wanted to mention that before, but I figure you have a question for him.
Oh, no. I mean, Okay, so what brought you to Costa Rica? You said was that your first country you visited when you were
That
20?
was the first country, besides going to Tijuana or Vancouver with, a day trip with my dad and brother or something. That was really the first country I went to on my own. And I wanted to do a study abroad during college, but some schools offer it's kind of included in their tuition, and some schools it's going to be a decent amount more. And didn't have anything kind of funded for me at any point. And so that knocked that off the table for me when I was in college. There was going to be several thousand more. And I'm like, I don't think these countries are that expensive. And so I went down and couch surfed, where you stay on people's couches for free, and basically spent absolutely nothing in 10 days in Costa Rica, and ran a marathon there, and just had my mind blown on how many new experiences. I barely knew Spanish when I went down there at all, and did that like senior year in college. And so figured that was a Spanish speaking, different, not too extreme country I could go to, and it looked interesting. I found a marathon that was over Christmas break I could run, and jumped at it. So that was number one. That was the first country I really visited on my own.
Wow. And then how did you get, I don't know if I missed it. How did you get into being a Spanish teacher? Were you like good at Spanish in high school and you learned, like, how did you get into that? My sister's a Spanish teacher.
Okay.
So she lived in Mexico for a year at one point, and she just always loved her Spanish classes in high school. So it's just something that stuck with her. So I'm always curious as to, like, how did you get into that?
I was not a huge fan of it in high school. I got through it and memorized what I had to, but took 2 years, graduated,
Yeah.
and was glad to move on with that.
Mm.
And my brother was a Spanish major and just raved about it. And then when he did a study abroad in Peru, he said, it's all kind of hypothetical when you're here, or not really using it in the real world. And then when you go to the country, you're going to love it. And so I took another class that I had to in college, and had a good professor, and then decided to go see what it would be like using it for 10 days in Costa Rica. And then when I graduated, started a master's program, international relations. Talked about this the other day in class. Didn't feel motivated, didn't really know what I was doing or what I was going to study or what my purpose was. And so stopped it, which was kind of against what my family thought I should do, but they got on board shortly thereafter when I got a one-way ticket to Guadalajara, Mexico, and started studying Spanish, and then got offered a job teaching English at the same school, at a language school there. And that just snowballed for the next 6 years of teaching English abroad, becoming fluent in Spanish and Portuguese. I lived in Brazil for almost half the time of those 6 years. And then when I thought about what I could do when I came back, I was like, well, I like teaching. I like teaching English. So I wonder what it'd be like if I was teaching high school or junior college or something. And high school is kind of the shortest route, and picture myself with little kids, and I become fluent in Spanish and Portuguese. So I figured I could get my teaching credential, and jumped into teaching high school Spanish. Within the credential year there, student teaching, and the following year with a full-time job teaching Spanish.
I feel like you're making this sound so easy. Like, I feel like all these things
It's true.
would take me 50 years to do. Like, I just can't. That's crazy. It's just, you've done, I mean, and we haven't heard half, we barely heard your story, but you're obviously young. And so I feel like you've done so much. And in my brain, I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know if I'm ever going to do all. So that's crazy. I mean, it's a compliment to you is what I'm saying. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's one of my biggest desires. Maybe people could call it worst fears on the other side, is just not kind of living a fulfilling or a life where you have all these regrets or things that you wish you had done or that you never got around to. And I think a big part of my story is that really sunk home. I came home from Latin America when my brother got suddenly ill, and then he ended up passing shortly thereafter. And then the following year, my dad passed. And those are my two best friends in the whole world. And if losing the two people that are the closest to you in your life doesn't really get it to sink in that we're not always having everything guaranteed and that we're not here forever, I don't know what will. So that got me really low. It took me way down. But I figured that I'd go out and do what I was most passionate about, and that would be traveling the outdoors and then teaching and helping and hopefully inspiring people by doing it. And that you didn't always just postpone things, because my brother was like 28 and my dad was fairly young. And so I just realized that I wanted to maximize my time, live for kind of my brother and I, and that not to just say one day I'm going to do these things and always put them in a bucket list that never gets emptied, but start emptying that bucket list and doing these activities and adventures and travels and trying to visit every country in the world, and do these things now, not some distant point, because it might not happen, but do them sooner than later.
Yeah, that's an incredible outlook. And you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I was gonna say, like, how much more special does it make each trip you go on, knowing that your brother was a huge traveler? Does, like, when you step on, like, when you get off that plane, you step into a new country, is there like a little bit of an extra special feeling knowing that you're
Yeah,
kind of like taking the torch?
definitely. I think about him every single day because he was in charge of our Spanish club, was an AP Spanish 4. All the teachers adored him at the school where I teach every single day. And then when I go to other countries, he's the one that convinced me. I was totally against it. But to start visiting other countries or step out of my comfort zone, he would only talk to me in Spanish sometimes for like hours at a time. And I absolutely hated it because I couldn't understand anything that he was saying. We take a road trip in like the state of Nevada. He'd be talking to me in Spanish without one word of English. And literally wanted to kick him out of the car. But like now, I would laugh about it a little bit, but at the time I hated it. It was like 8 hours or something of like
Oh
no English.
man.
All right, with like basic 2 years of high school Spanish, just trying to ask him like questions for how to plan the trip and things. But every time I go to another country, I think about him, and every time I go somewhere different and interact with locals and try to be an American that goes in not as an all knowing, we're the best, we're the greatest, we have all the answers, we're the loudest, but as someone that goes in to try to break those stereotypes, to be humble, be listening, be someone that's worked a million hours to learn 2 other languages, to stay with local families, to accept meals, to completely put yourself kind of at the bottom level and how normal people live and accept and almost always say yes as long as I feel safe to anything people offer, to see how people live. And I rarely do tours or try to sign up for all inclusive resorts or anything. Like I just don't do that stuff because I like to see how people live. I've stayed with families in the biggest refugee camp in Iraq. I've stayed with families all over Pakistan. I've stayed in families in like the dangerous areas of the world that have been so welcoming and just loving. And I mean, I just stay with millions of people all over the place that you would never expect. And the world's full of good people. I think about them every time that I have these interactions with people all over the world.
That's really interesting because was it Malcolm Gladwell has the book where he talks about the 10,000 hours, right? And if you want to become an expert in something, you put in those 10,000 hours, and that's kind of like the minimum of what you need. But it's interesting because I don't even know what your 10,000 hours would be. I mean, is it just understanding cultures? Is it exploring? It's almost like exploring is your 10,000 hours, right? Because you seem like a pro in all of this.
Sure. Like we just went to Colombia over Thanksgiving break with my roommate and and you could be terrified, you could be afraid, but I know it's going to work out. And, I literally book things on the way with a local SIM card the day of where we're going to stay. We keep it ultimately flexible. And I know it's going to work out. And I've done it, a ton of times. So I trust the process. And, I went to 100 countries 3 years ago and I took the year off of teaching. It was just day by day. I mean, I did maybe one country at a time and was just doing it along the way. I could always like basically say yes and be invited to a meal at a person's house or stay with them. And some people absolutely hate that uncertainty, or I don't have my whole thing booked, or someone's not picking me up at the airport with a van with a shot. Like everything was independently done basically, unless I had to go into Yemen with a driver, and that's the only way I could go. But almost everything was totally independent. And yeah, I guess you'd call it just 10,000 hours of trusting strangers and trusting that people are good in the world and trusting your street knowledge and trusting that things will work out and that you have a million questions and you don't know the answers and you're okay with that and you're willing to let people help you out.
That's
Wow.
awesome. Sorry, Deb, I have one more question. I know
But
you
you're
probably have a million. I'm sorry. This is what happens, Brian. Like we have a bunch of questions and then we step all over each other. But you mentioned, and when I was kind of doing my research on you, something that came up quite a bit was this idea of finding good people in the world. And obviously, like I say it a million times when we do these shows, our whole goal is connecting with people. And it sounds like your whole goal is to connect with good people and to show that good people are in every country, at every corner of the world. Um, when did that idea start, and why are you so passionate about finding good people?
Ooh, when to start? I think like almost anything, it grows a long time. I don't know if there's one instance where you say like I didn't trust people and now I trust people. I think growing up in the US, we're taught not to trust strangers and that we lock our doors and we go from one place to another. And if it's someone new on the street, we avoid them. And there's some wisdom to that. I'm not, totally ignorant, but I think in other cultures, so much of the people, they live, they interact with each other. They're in the streets, there's street food, there's people walking around, and it's just common to ask for help, ask for questions, have people taking you places. You get lost. I get lost like every day when I'm in another country. That's just what happens. And so I think when you have thousands of experiences of people helping you out and not taking advantage of you, or maybe a couple people that you just, all right, like, I don't feel comfortable with this person, I'm going to go ask someone else, or whatever they offered, I don't trust this person. And so you just learn on experience. And I think, having that in, whether it's Somalia, where I met, Somaliland, the northern region of Somalia, where I met really kind local people that had me on their only English television program in the whole country, and took me over to their house. I had a meal and then had me on TV the next day. Like, only thing you're going to see on Somalia is, civil war, conflict, or piracy, or whatever it may be. And there I am, on TV with people that are just extremely welcoming and kind. And it just breaks down whatever barriers you have of travel. And when it happens 1,000 times, you can't help but expect good from people.
Wow, that's awesome. And do you, out of all the countries you've traveled to already, do you keep in touch with any of those families that you've stayed with, or any of the people, like through social media, or how do you keep that, connection going?
Sure. Yeah. WhatsApp is kind of how the world communicates when you're trying to message people. And so a lot of people have on WhatsApp. A lot of people have Instagram or Facebook and things. And so, yeah, I have friends that are in all over the world, all different countries, and friends that are kind of in the same boat as me, where we're trying to visit every country in the world. And we formed somewhat of a little bit of a team where if I have information, I share it. If they have information, I have a few friends that literally, if I need a contact or a way to get into any country in the world, I can ask them, and vice versa. And then local people that live there. So it's fun to have people you've stayed with, because it's amazing. I mean, the cell phone and internet have just transformed everything, to sitting there like a dial-up, like waiting to book on Hostel World maybe 12 years ago, to now WhatsApping someone you found on Booking a minute ago and having them with a spare bedroom in their house in Cameroon that you're staying at for $10 a night, and they're waiting for you at 7 o'clock with dinner ready because you just WhatsApped them. And it's amazing.
Wow.
It's amazing how you can get connected.
Yeah. And then where was the last place you traveled to most recently?
Over Thanksgiving break, 2 weeks
Oh yeah,
ago,
you just said that. Yeah.
Colombia. And I've been to Colombia before. I lived there in Bogota. And as far as like getting to every country in the world, it's come to a little bit of a screeching halt here, unfortunately, because I went to 100 countries 3 years ago. I had 6 left. And I worked my way into Venezuela, Syria, Algeria, and Libya, 4 of the hardest countries in the world to get into. And then COVID hit. And so Taiwan and North Korea are the last 2. And I know how to do the DMZ tour that officially, just barely, gets you into North Korea. And then I have friends that teach English in Taiwan. So whenever you don't have to quarantine for 2 weeks and they're actually letting people into those 2 countries, I'll go do the last 2 in 3 days or 5 days. I mean, it's super easy. I know how to do it. It's just a question of when these countries open back up to a little more normalcy.
Right. That was going to be my next question, was how difficult has it been since obviously travel, like, and so since COVID hit. But that's pretty cool that that's all you have left. That's crazy.
Yeah, those are the last 2. I really had to like be patient and not, I mean, obviously you want to fit, I was so close. 2 countries left and all of a sudden the world shut down. But I look at it more in the glass half full, that I took kind of a self-created sabbatical year 3 years ago. If I'd done it 2 years ago, I probably would have had to come back in February and still had 30 or 40 African countries I would never have gotten to. And so the timing of it was kind of perfect that I went the year before the world closed, February, March-ish. And so overall, like, hindsight is 2020, but it worked out to be the perfect year to go.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that would be like for you, man, because obviously your passion for traveling gets completely wiped out because of everything that's going on in the world. And you're a teacher. So then your world as a teacher gets flipped upside down as well. Just your entire world. Like, you can't escape it. I mean, most people can't escape it, but you really can't escape it.
It was very different. And thankfully, I kind of came up with a decent solution, at least for me and for what I love doing. And so we had, like, from March to June, we finished up that school year 2 years ago with no one knew what was coming, right? So we were kind of like just doing basic classes on Zoom and giving them a little bit of work. But then when it looked like it was going to continue, I sold my Camry and just bought a minivan with the same price of it, like an older minivan, and just put a sleeping platform in it. And was like, I'm just going to teach on the road in the fall. And so I lived out of it for 6 months from June to November, and then would teach from friends' houses and coffee shops. And probably did 80 of the best hikes in the country in the fall. And so I'd be either camping or sleeping with friends at their places, then be in the Grand Canyon Glacier National Park. I've hiked all the 14ers or the 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado. So I was out in Colorado for about a month, Utah, Washington. So I just lived out of the van all fall. And that was my solution to not being completely confined or trapped. And we didn't have to be in person. So I could just teach online as long as I had internet from 9 to 3 every day.
There was
Wow.
there was a blessing in disguise, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like in the country, you could do things.
Yeah, I was like, well, our country's beautiful. I've seen some. I mean, I'd already been to all 50 states, but there's so many hikes and outdoor places that I wanted to see. And I had ideas, like I've seen quite a few, but I wanted to go back and hit up all these different areas. And now I had a remote job and had to be in the country basically, and had just freedom of just working from internet and friends that had places to stay along the way. And so it worked out pretty well, all things considered.
That's
Wow.
awesome. Now, does the name, the nickname, the World Hiker, does that come because are you intentional about trying to actually hike in these different countries, or is it more of like you're hiking the world, like just basically, is that another word for travel?
Yeah, a good question. Well, I was thinking the year before I took off 3 years ago, I was asking my students, like, should I do anything different? Oh, you should like start recording or sharing a little bit more on social media. And so I don't really think I did much with Instagram, or definitely didn't do anything with YouTube before. They're like, oh, you love travel. So the world, and you love hiking in the outdoors, the World Hiker. I don't know. We just kind of came up with the name.
There you
And
go.
I do focus on hiking a lot in the outdoors when I go to other countries. I'm not a huge city, cafe, like museum type person. I like to get more in the outdoors, but it just kind of combined the two worlds that I love, which is world travel and then hiking or being in the outdoors, whether it's in the US or abroad. So that's kind of how the name came about.
Awesome. Now, obviously, you mentioned that going through high school and in college, you were an athlete. Was it baseball, basketball, and soccer? How exciting and how much fun has that been to see and experience sports? I mean, especially like when it comes to soccer, right? You look at soccer all around the world. It's huge, right? And it's just a different fandom that you see over there. Or like I'm a big baseball fan. I played a little bit in high school, and you look at like some of these like the Dominican Republic, right? Venezuela, it's huge there. So what has it been like to experience those sports in the other countries?
Sports are great. Yeah, I love sports. I'm a huge sports fan. And I got to go to a baseball game in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic.
Oh,
And like Vlad Guerrero is just outside the stadium hanging out. They have everyone, it's picture the size of Northern California, but that's where a third or a quarter of the big leaguers come from. So
yeah,
you got a little island. Everyone has a family member or a neighbor or someone they know that's an ex big leaguer or current big leaguer. I mean, they just produce baseball talent,
right.
just at an incredible rate. And so
Yeah.
baseball is fantastic, being in Puerto Rico, Cuba, Dominican. And then I played soccer all the way through high school as well. And soccer is the world sport. I mean, like I look at the map in my class with the kids of each country's most popular sport, and soccer is like dominates 160 countries in the world or something. It's
Yeah.
like basically like 90% of the world it's soccer. And so I was a season ticket holder in Mexico for about a year when I was there to Chivas, which is the main team in Guadalajara. And then I was a season ticket holder in southern Brazil in the city I was living in called Curitiba, and saw Neymar and Ronaldo and Ronaldinho and Kaká and
Wow.
younger guys before they went to Europe and older guys when they came back to Brazil and already were at the tail end of their career. And yeah, the atmosphere is insane in the stadiums. I mean, they would hold us, like I was with the home side, let's say cheering section in the stadium often for like an hour after the game. So it's like
Wow.
at a Kings game or something, the Lakers fans leave and then the Kings fans have to stay from 10 to 11 until everyone's already gone. So there wouldn't be brawls and things outside the games because
Yeah.
um, they take it really seriously. They take it really seriously. And, a lot of the younger people that come that are in the La Porra, they call it in Mexico, or the cheering section, like that's their life. It really
Yeah.
is. They'll have tattoos of their teams all over them. And, it's almost kind of like, I almost say like gangs or something, but it's really their life. And the national team plays, obviously the whole country shuts down. And soccer has been fun. So I felt it firsthand in Brazil and Mexico definitely a lot when I was living there.
That's
That is
awesome. Hey,
awesome.
I wanted to kind of pass the ball to you, Deb, because like I mentioned a couple episodes ago, one of Deb's good friends was on the show, and we talked a little bit about traveling and some of just the funny traveling stories that her friend Nicole had. But on that episode, she revealed that, Deb, you're going to be making a couple trips to some different countries coming up pretty soon. So I feel like this is an awesome time to ask some questions about those countries.
What's funny, before we hit record, I thought about that and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to sound like such an idiot because I can't remember where I'm going.
Oh, no. Well, never mind, Brian. I thought I was trying to like give her a little layup and then.
Brian, I am horrible with geography. Anyway, I'm going to Europe and I'm going on a river cruise, and it is totally slipping my mind of what the river's called. You probably
The Danube, maybe, or
no, it's gonna like, I'm gonna go through Germany. I'm gonna be in Amsterdam too. I'm gonna like, I need to look it up.
Sorry, I should have asked this question.
Thanks, Josh. I like, before we record, I'm like, I can't think of it. Why can't I think of it? What's that river called? And my friend's probably listening to this right now thinking, you idiot, like you don't have the river. I don't remember what it's called.
you know what? Like the continent that I've saved the most is Europe, because I picture going back there future, and it's easier, safer. Everyone else wants to go there, and in the future, family, wife, like whatever comes, like I've gone to the more adventurous spots of the world and focused on that, because you might not want to go across the Sahara in a bus. You know, it's 130 degrees sitting on gas tanks with 8 people on every bench. But in the future, you know, you might be a little more inclined to go on a river cruise or go to Spain or England or France or somewhere. So I've saved, I've been to every country in Europe, but I'm looking forward to going back and exploring more of the countries, because I've focused a little bit more on the rest of the world and then left the easier countries to go explore more comfortably maybe in the future.
Yeah. Sweet.
Awesome.
I'm literally looking up. I'm like, what's the river called?
Trying to salvage it right now. Well,
that's bugging me too. I want to know. But anyway, so I've only been to Mexico and Costa Rica. I went on a missions trip a few years ago, and that was really cool. And then I've been on a Caribbean cruise. So I've been to like Jamaica, you know, the touristy, you know, stuff. And then I'm going to Europe, and that's that's all the world traveling I've done. So that's why when you said all you said, I was like, oh my God, that like in my brain, I'm like, how? But that is so cool. I'm gonna keep looking for this river. It's gonna bug me.
You know what? Like you just take small steps. So I think starting with Western Europe or the Caribbean or Mexico is where a lot of Americans generally start. And then when you go, you just build up confidence. And there's kind of, in my mind, maybe 3 tiers in the world. You have the countries that most people go to, and maybe for good reason, safer, more attractions, more English speaking, more modern. And then you have kind of the middle countries, and you have the, you know, more challenging countries in the world to go to. And it makes sense to start with the first group. So
the Rhine
sure.
River.
Rhine. Okay, yeah, that sounds familiar too.
Okay. Like, why can't I think of it? That's what it's called. Rhine River Cruise. I don't know. So
there you go. I know for next time. That was a bad co-host move. I thought I was being helpful, and turns out I was not.
Beforehand, don't ask about my Europe cruise because I can't remember the river.
I was excited. I thought it'd be a fun conversation. Turns out it was a bad idea. But so hey, my family. So I'm half Japanese. My dad's Japanese. We have some family. It's really funny. You know, you kind of mentioned the social media thing. So for years, I had 2 grandparents here, my Bajan and Jijan here in the States, just over in Woodland. And that was kind of the extent, you know, of like our Japanese culture, right? Like my Jijan would speak primarily Japanese. My Bajan was very fluent in Japanese and English. But when it came to like family over in Japan, there wasn't really any connection. Like we knew we had family over there, but there was really no way of connecting with them. And about 3-4, I think it was 4 years ago, I got a DM or a Facebook message from this little Japanese girl saying, hey, and I'm like, I just deleted it. I'm like, I've seen this before, just delete. And then, you know, I was talking to my mom, and she's like, hey, I got this really weird message from this little Japanese girl. And I said, oh yeah, I did too. I just deleted it. And she's like, well, I read it. And she's like, she was saying she was our cousin. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm gonna go back and try to recover that because I just completely disregarded it. Well, a lot of the stuff she was saying, added up, and it turns out we made this connection through Instagram or through Facebook with family over there. And then since then, my mom, my dad, and my aunt all traveled over there for about, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. Saw family, saw a lot of Japan. So like it is a really cool part of the whole social media thing. Like you said, you're able to make all these connections with people throughout the world. And if you're going to a new place, you probably have a connection to someone that has connections there, and it makes your travel just way easier and way more it just like enhances the experience, I feel. But for us, it helps us to even get connected with family we didn't even really know we had. So I don't know, man. It's just it's a cool thing, and I feel like I don't know, you'd be the one to talk to, but do you feel like it's easier now? Like, how much has it changed over the last 10 years as far as connecting with people and traveling
A ton.
without COVID, minus COVID?
It's night and day. Oh, I can't wait till the world opens back up a little bit more to be able to travel without, things being shoved up your nose every time you leave or
Right.
leave or enter a country.
Yeah.
But yeah, technology side of it, I mean, I'm not that old, but I remember sitting there in internet cafes for half an hour, like trying to book something at Hostel World for the next couple of nights where we were going to stay. And Southeast Asia is kind of our first main trip right after college. I went with my brother and two best friends, and it took a huge chunk of time. And we booked something, and then we didn't have smartphones. I mean, we probably wrote down the address and tried to figure
Man.
out how to get there. I mean, it was really hard to find places. Just being able to have a SIM card. I mean, I haven't collected them, but I've probably gotten 190 out of 195 SIM cards. That's the first thing I do when I get in every country. I'm not someone that loves to be tied to my phone all the time. Like I like getting outdoors and putting it away, but you need it. You need it to operate, and it makes life so much easier when you're traveling to look up whether it's bus schedules or booking accommodations, a huge one, or talking to your host where you're going to stay, or looking. I'm in the bus in Colombia last 2 weeks ago, and where to go outside of Medellin, where to go in Cartagena, where to go in El Eje Cafetero or the Coffee Triangle region. Like literally, I'm spending that week looking where we're going to go the next day, and it works out really well because I just got a local SIM card and 5 gigabytes of data, and there's no way 10-15 years ago you could do that and plan things on the fly in the country with $10 of data thrown on a SIM card. It's night and day. Yeah, it's changed everything.
Wow. So let me ask you this, kind of taking it in a different direction, because I'm sure most people that are listening to this are wondering this, and they've probably been wondering it the whole time. What's the most bizarre thing you've eaten?
Most bizarre thing. I had like butterfly larvae in South Korea that they were serving like in a soup.
Oh,
Last year for Christmas, I was in Ecuador and we had cuy, which is guinea pig. And I had that when I came off of Cotopaxi, which is a 19,000-foot volcano that I climbed on Christmas Eve last year.
oh,
And the local family had like 40 guinea pig behind their house. And so they said they'd bring one in for lunch when I was done, because you start at like midnight and they get done at like 8 in the morning. So we had cuy or guinea pig, which they like rotate on the spit and barbecue for you.
That's legit.
yeah. Say, hey, go grab a guinea pig. It's time for lunch. That's crazy.
And like in general, in lots of countries in sub-Saharan Africa, I didn't really know what I was eating. Like just meat or whatever they caught and were stewing up. Like that's what we ate. And I don't speak that much French. And maybe they spoke French. Sometimes it was zero French anyways, but
Yeah.
eat where they were making, and that's what lunch or dinner was. So a lot of things I probably don't even know what they are, but those are a few of the ones that I do know what they were.
Okay. Well, so I get the sense that you're just like, when it comes to food, you're down to try anything. But what was maybe the last thing, whether you showed it or not, what was the last thing you're like, man, like there was that little hesitation where it's like, I'm going to eat this, but I'm going to hesitate a little bit.
Yeah, probably 2 weeks ago in Colombia, they have the national plate is called La Bandeja Paisa, or like the platter from Medellin. And they had like some chorizo, like blood sausages and things that just smelled like they were straight from the farm. Like they just smelled like cows
Oh,
or something. Like
oh no.
they weren't that great. So they had like 4 or 5 kinds of meats on it, which was fine. So I just kind of pushed that one off to the side. My friend
Okay.
I travel with, he's a vegetarian, so he tried it and was like completely freaked out. And I was like, yeah, that's not my favorite. So there's things you try that you're like,
Yeah.
not gonna work. But thankfully, like my mom said, and she forced me, she would sit there and make me eat everything when I grew up, and I hated it, but it's
Mhm.
come back to be a huge blessing. And so
Yeah.
anything anyone's preparing, I'm going to try it. And if we're sitting there with a family, I'm going to eat everything. And if it's me on my own, like some things, very few I'll push off to the side, but basically everything I'll eat. Some are favorites, some are not, but I'll say yes. If someone's cooking it, like it's pretty like not polite, I would think, to
Sure.
invite you in and then like refuse what they're eating. It's just
Right.
part of them inviting you. So
Right.
I'm eating everything and almost everything I do like or tolerate. So
Is there, and then on the opposite scale, is there anything that you like is like every once in a while just like burns in your head of like, oh my God, that was so good. I want this so bad right now. Like, was there a dish that was just
the
amazing?
world's full. The world's full of amazing food, absolutely amazing food. And our neighbor just below us is probably one of the best countries in the world to eat in, and not like American Mexican food, but Mexico Mexican food. I mean,
Mm.
every weekend, Mexico City has over 1 million street vendors. 1 million. That's like more people than we have in Sacramento. That's like if every single house in Sacramento opened up their garage and had a stall, right? Like
Yeah.
something that they were selling. Mexican food is incredible and it's so good.
Wow.
And so last year I lived there actually for 4 years. My
Wow.
girlfriend's from Mexico. She lives or was living at the time in Puebla, and so go out to eat street food dinner for less than you could cook at home every single night, and the food is insanely good. And so Mexico, obviously, right there. And then if I had to pick like one meal tomorrow that was my last meal on earth, I'd probably go to Brazilian barbecue because in 2.5 years, the US are expensive. They're like 40, $50 and up, but we would go to ones for maybe like $10 US, more or less. And 40, 50 different kinds of meats coming around on spits with waiters like sprinting to your table 5 or
Yeah.
10 times a minute. And then a huge
Wow.
buffet of salads and things and like tropical fruits. And it's an
Wow.
experience. Like it's almost like a sporting event when you go to Brazilian barbecue
It
in
sounds like it.
it's fun. It's really fun. Like the first time I went, after like 20 minutes, I was destroyed. Like I could barely walk. And then he told me like you don't have to say yes to everybody, right? Like you can say no when the waiters come. You don't have to say yes because I was like, seam. Like I wanted everything that they brought. You got to fix yourself, or you're just going to destroy
Right.
yourself completely.
Hey man, that's why you hike, right?
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
why I
Yeah.
had a marathon like 2 weeks ago.
Right.
You can just eat
Yeah.
and eat and you don't feel it. So
Well, I was just, yeah, I'm glad you brought the marathon up because you just did the CIM and I thought that was really cool, man, because I saw the videos, I saw your students out there cheering you on.
thank
Um, and I thought that was the coolest thing. I know some people that ran for some different causes, the CIM for some different causes, and they had their students or their athletes cheering them on. So it was awesome. Um, and I've done the CIM a few times, and
nice. Congrats. You were in small percentage of people that run a marathon. So
that's where I leave that conversation. I don't tell them my times. It was very slow, but my thought though was like, so I didn't realize you had done because obviously I just saw you do the CIM. I didn't realize your first marathon was in a different country. The scenery completely different. Like the CIM is a lot of fun to run. It's kind of fun to see that part of Sacramento, but it doesn't. I mean, it's not going to compare to your first marathon. Like, how weird is that?
Especially in Costa Rica. That was
Right.
that it was, right?
it was on the beach between two towns, super informals. You're gonna run to the town that's 13 miles away, run around a cone. There's gonna be a guy there that can check you're there, and then you're gonna run back. So it's called the Jungle Man Marathon. It was pretty informal, and
Yeah.
wow, it's hard running on the beach, like and
Yeah.
compared to running that, and other races abroad that have been completely adventurous, and then running a CIM where I worked as a pacer this time, so I was helping people to get to the finish at a certain time. So I paced the 3:35 pace group, which was fun and like nice to be able to run about a minute or so miles. Like you have to be able to run a marathon 20 to 30 minutes faster to be able to be a pacer, to be asked on. And so this time, 50 people looking at you for ideas and conversation and tell them about the course and things. And yeah, it was fun to help out. Like, extremely different than like there's a cone 13 miles away to this one. People want to know, what kind of electrolyte flavors are going to be at every aid station. Obviously it's like a little bit different of an atmosphere, and
Yeah.
both are fun. And everything in the US is very well operated and things. And I've run, like the first ever marathon in Haiti a few years ago, where it was like
Oh.
3 or 4 hours late. The local people didn't really know what was going on. We were running through weekend markets. At the finish, like local people were eating the food because they wanted it that was out there, like for the runners and things. It's like,
Oh, that's
yeah,
funny.
there's very different. And workout might not be the same, and depending on what country you're in and where you're at, so it can change drastically.
Oh my gosh. That is yeah, that would be a completely different experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if you're a pacer too. That's a lot of just random conversations you're gonna have. So I'd be like, yeah, being on the beach for a marathon just in the quiet would probably be pretty nice.
Yeah, and I go out and run in the mountains all the time,
Yeah.
and did, like Mount Whitney, for example, on my own in 12 hours a few weeks ago in the snow, which is the highest
Wow.
peak in the continental US. And
Yeah.
I'm happy doing that, and then also happy like chatting it up with 50 people for 26 miles and telling them about marathoning or pacing or running or whatever it is, and your experiences running all over the world. And so like it's good to be able to do both. And we had both the guy that ran with me and I are teachers at the same high school. And so I put it out there, printed out a map with our pace, and then gave the kids extra credit for coming out. So I had 35 of my students out there, and then about 20 of them that ran with us, which is pretty cool along the way. So I tried to include a bunch of them in the little video I did with GoPro along the way there whenever I could pull it out. I had to hold the sign for half the way too. So try not to be like
Yeah.
super unofficial and run off to my kids and GoPro them when I was holding mine. But I tried to do some of both, and it was fun. It was fun to be able to see that many people come out, that much support. It goes right by our high school in Fair Oaks, at like mile
Yeah.
18, 20 there. So a lot of them came out and joined, and were, had signs, were excited to be out there and excited to be in the video that we watched in class the next day when
That's
we were
cute.
together. And so it was fun to see all the support.
That's
Oh,
awesome. I just hit me too. So one of our guests, we used to have a different podcast that we started a couple years ago, and one of our first guests was Vicky Warren. You know Vicky?
Yeah, Vicky's at Rio.
Yeah. She used to be at my old high school at Casa. Not when I was there, but we had her on as a guest, and I don't know why that just hit me that she started teaching over there not too long ago. So yeah, she's awesome. So anyways, that was just random. It just popped in my head. So that's what happens on the show, Brian. It's just all over the place. So.
Well, I want to know, obviously you're an athlete, ex-athlete. You'll always be an athlete. So that's how I say that. And obviously you're running. Is that what got you into running, or how did you get into like, oh, I'm just going to run a marathon? Like, how did that happen? How did the build up?
Kind of interesting. Actually, the first one I ran was in high school. And my dad said, you play soccer, you run 3 or 4 miles a game. Why don't you sign up for next Sunday's marathon, like 5 years before? You think you're invincible, and you're like, why not, right? And so I signed up. I think I did about 8 miles on Monday, 10 on Tuesday, like 12 on Wednesday. I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go. I trained for 3 days. And out there, and I was a sophomore, so maybe 14, 15. I mean, I just died. I got to Rio, I got mile 18, and the rest of it was a blur. I hobbled in. I wasn't going to quit, but I hobbled in basically from, Eastern or Watt Fair Oaks all the way to the Capitol. And I never missed school, but I couldn't move. So I missed school Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I couldn't walk. And then and on crutches Thursday and Friday. And
oh man, what was your time?
A little bit. I think it was just under 4 hours. So it wasn't that bad, but it was so painful. It was so bad. I swore it. I'm like, who would do that? And who would even pay to do that? And like, I'm never going to do one of those again. So I was convinced I was never going to run again. And then 5 or 6 years later, I got a job with my brother out at backpacking, like a summer camp in Colorado. And outdoors was totally foreign. I never really camped. I never done anything, hiking, mountains. I knew nothing, but he convinced me to go out. He loved it. He was there as a camper. And people woke up at 5 in the morning and they're like, come trail running with us. I said no for the first couple of weeks. Then I went out once. I was like, all right, it was all right. And so there were people that were pretty hardcore and had traveled. And I was like, oh, I think I could try it with these people. And so I went out and ended up kind of getting used to trail running 3 or 4 miles every morning. And then we decided that we'd try to run a marathon in our respective cities or towns where we went back to. Most of us were in college at the time. And so I trained for the CIM instead of for 3 days for 3 or 4 months. And it went much better the second time around than it did the first time. So that's kind of how I got into it.
I bet.
And then over the next 7 or 8 years, really got hooked. And a lot of it was abroad. I was living in Mexico and kind of got into different running teams. So we'd travel over Mexico running marathons. It was fun. And we take a bus Friday and come back Sunday and run marathons, whether it's in Mazatlan or Monterrey or Leon and Guadalajara and just different places all over the country. And it's something I could do when I taught English abroad that would work around my schedule. And then I came back and I started running a ton. And I ran maybe 40 marathons there in a few years when I came home, and road ones, then trail ones down in the Bay Area, and ended up winning a few of the trail runs. So the guy gave me a free code to run every race for free. And I took full advantage of it.
Wow.
I ran like maybe 20 of the trail marathons in 2 years down there in the Bay Area, and small, like by no means am I that fast or have I ever been that fast, but when maybe half of them I was in. And so just signed up for free, went down, they had a free barbecue at the end. I would just drive down Saturday morning, run the race, come back, and then no expo, no hotels, no like, waiting for 10,000 people to cross the start. It was just fun. And thankfully I was in like good enough shape to do 26 miles every few weeks and training or in a race. And so I was just kind of pumping it out there for a few years.
Wow.
I like how casually you say all these things. I hear that time. I'm like, oh, I would die. I would die. Mine was like just over 5 hours and I was really struggling. And I did do the training. Can you imagine that? Like, just barely trying to cross the finish line.
They're hard. They're hard. 26.2 miles is farther than humans are often feel like we're made to go. And it's a lot. You can't get away with it. Like I've tried to do sometimes without training that much. And like, it's hard. You gotta train. You gotta stay on it. And for me, just running's kind of been the base. I know, like you listen to certain people, and they'll say, "Oh, like Dwayne Johnson or something." Like I gotta do my workout every single day. Like getting in the gym and lifting weights. Like that's what makes me tick. Like for me, I have to go for a run almost every day. It's just kind of what makes me tick after being in class in the winter, or maybe before school in the summer if it's hot, and doing 3 to 6 miles a day and doing a long run on the weekend just allows me to go do what I want to do and do the adventures and travel and feel like I have endurance, and makes me happy, makes me peaceful, makes me calm. I know, it just makes life function for me.
That's awesome. We definitely have some people we need to get you connected with that are in that running world that have been on this show before, because I think you're in their world for sure, and they would love to get connected with you.
It's always nice to meet fellow runners and adventurers and people that are doing it. So happy to meet them.
Well, we will do that for sure. So I have two questions for you. Number one, and we won't keep you too much longer because we want to be respectful of your time. And this has been awesome, man. Like this has been a lot of fun, just kind of picking your brain.
I'm happy to help. So
thank you. We appreciate that, man. So two questions, not really related. It's driving me nuts though. The picture behind you, where is that?
I am pretty sure it's in the Grand Tetons. It was actually here when I moved in. A house, a family friend that lives below, and then I live in the upper part of the house.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's the Snake River in the Grand Tetons because I think I was there last fall.
Oh my God.
I'm almost positive of that. So when you're looking into Grand Tetons Park from across the river.
That's awesome.
No, I love how he can just look at a random picture in someone's house and he's like, yep, I was there.
I know.
Like,
it's true.
Recognizes it and everything.
I know, I'm trying to look. I'm like looking for a magazine or something. I just want to like test you, man. Just like put up different pictures. Like, where's this? I feel like if you come back on the show, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have some trivia for you and see how much you know, because I feel like you're just gonna crush it.
Let's go for it. A few years ago, I forced myself to memorize every country in the world, and I didn't know why exactly. I know I like geography, but it was kind of like foreshadowing a little bit that literally I have to be learning a ton of facts about every country because I'd be independently planning how to go there. And so it worked out really well. And so I had a blank map and I could fill out every single country in the world. I could have a friend ask me. I could go through by continents and name every single country in the world. And now, having to literally have stepped on the ground and planned every second, it's come back to help a lot. So geography, some kind of facts you can remember about each person's country. When you meet them too, it's kind of special when you meet anyone, and you're like, all right, I was here, like, wow, have something you can share about every person's country. So
that's crazy. I'm lucky I can make it home every day from work. You know what I mean? Like, and he can name every country. That's wild. Okay, so
you can be a geography teacher at this point. Like you have enough.
Yeah, no joke.
You not even have to take a test. You should be able to just automatically teach geography if you want to teach it, because
the guy who I paced with, who's a teacher, who's my roommate actually right now, he teaches geography. And so we're constantly, he's like, all right, I'm gonna talk about Colombia or Peru or, some videos that are not like professional or any means, but make some different videos on YouTube, and he'll use them in class. Like, all right, what should I include on what countries in Asia should I include? I'm like, all right, well, these would be the ones I put in. So yeah, I love geography.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you kind of brought the teaching thing back into it, because I don't think we really touched on this, but like, how much has your travel and your knowledge and experience with the world enhanced your ability to connect with your students and teach them about these different cultures? I mean, I imagine it's just incredible. I imagine they like soak it up, but like, tell us a little bit about how it's helped you as a teacher.
I love it. I had different professors in college that I really connected with because they did it. They didn't just talk about it. And I'm more of a doer rather than like a talk, but I've never done it kind of person. And so I was a little scared of being a teacher because I didn't think I was smart enough or nerdy enough or enough of like a book person. But then when I realized that two of the main factors, when I was talking to a friend about coming back and teaching, were, can you connect with kids? Can you make them feel like you love them and care about them? And if you're on board and connect with them, then you can do anything in class, is what she said. And then that I've done all these things and experienced them. So when I open up the Spanish textbook, like, oh great, there's something about Carnival in Brazil or Day of the Dead in Mexico, or whatever it is, like I just scratch it because I have stuff I can share and I have friends that have been there, or I have videos on it, or whatever it is. And so it's all personal experience, and I think it comes to life for them. I hope it does. And I'm not talking about theory. It's not like I'm handpicking, oh, the textbook says that Cuba has a lot of this. Or like, no, it's like, when I went to Cuba, here's what happened. I ran out of money because my 3 ATM cards were all blocked. And I went to a bus stop, and 3 Argentinian guys took me in for 4 days and paid for the rest of my week there, because I had no way of wiring money when Cuba was completely like off limits to Americans. And I was there with my Mexican work visa, so like, it's fun. It's fun to be able to share firsthand things. And I think the kids get on board, and I think it kind of opens their perspective, because when I was 16 or 17, suburban life in Sacramento was all I knew. And I got former students that come back and ask me questions, or send me messages about studying abroad or traveling. And maybe it's planting the seed. Maybe they can't pick up over Thanksgiving and go to Colombia like I can, but in a few years, I think hopefully it'll be someone that they remember, and that someone that lived it and not just talked about it or opened the book and hit them over the head with a textbook. So for me, it's like half the class is what I have to do content wise, and then half, sometimes more or less, of the class is either culture, music, street food experiences, festivals, projects, something that I could work in that's a little more of what I'm excited about.
That's so cool.
I feel like I would, if I were a high school student, I would connect with that way more too, because basically anything other than sports or math was not my forte in high school at all. Or unless it was creative writing, then I was good to go. But I I just did not understand. Nothing stuck. So I feel like if that was something that I would experience, that would be super helpful. So I'm sure your kids really appreciate it.
I have really good kids. I love them. Like every day you go in, you just get this huge emotional pickup, and like, they're excited to see you come in. Like we have a good time together. We have a really good time. And so, yeah, they feel that you care about them, and vice versa. And so it's, yeah, we get a lot of good stuff in class.
Yeah, you're probably the teacher where they're like, bruh, he's been everywhere.
Yeah.
Ask me anything. He's in there.
Bruh. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, and I don't know if you feel comfortable with answering this question, but I'm getting the sense that you might be that teacher that other teachers in your department hate, because like, who's going to want to go to their class? You know what I'm saying? Like, I had teachers like that. It's like, if you have this English teacher or this English teacher, and the one has way more passion experience for it, it's like, yeah, I want to go to that class. And then it's like, oh, I got the other one.
The other one.
Yeah. They don't even have a name.
I enjoy having all the kids. I'm glad they're there. They happen to switch in. I'll love them and enjoy having them in class and share with them, and be excited to see them in a couple of years or before or after school. So all I can say is I'll try to share and care for them and love them as much as I can. So
that was a good answer, and it gave me everything I needed to know. I know exactly what he's trying to say, because he's still an athlete. Brian's still an athlete. He's competitive. I get it. That's awesome. No, I completely agree though. It is cool to have teachers that have that experience. I remember like Deb, like you were saying, I remember having a psychology teacher. He just took it to a different level than just reading out of the textbook. Like he could have, but there was rarely days where we read the textbook. It was more him sharing real life stories and then applying psychological concepts to those stories. It's like, and people were just engaged the entire time. And so I have no doubt that's what you're doing. And Deb and I were just talking about this on our last episode. Like how much, because my wife's a teacher. She doesn't teach at the same high school she graduated from, but she teaches somewhere else in Sacramento. And, just a lot of respect for what you guys do, because I mean, what you guys do is incredibly difficult, but it's incredibly important too. And so, I've felt so, like Deb's heard me say this so many times, like, I don't believe that everybody should be a teacher, because it's just such an important job and it's so hard that I think you have to have the right mindset to do it and the right amount of passion to do it. And man, it's clear that you have that. So, I don't have any high school children. My kids are pretty young, but I'm glad there's teachers like you that are out there that one day my kids will have, and they can learn from people like you, man. That's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And try to go in giving all you can every single day. And for some reason, at some point in the future, you don't feel that passion or feel like you should be doing something different, I don't do them a disservice. I feel like I have 160, 170 people that look up to you and get to hear what you say for an hour a day, all year long. And so, like you said, I think you should be wanting to be there and have the right motives for being there. And clearly, it's not a job that you do for like the money or the fame or the glory or positive feedback. You get every once in a while a compliment or something that like really picks you up, but most of the time you're getting great or this or that, and
Yeah.
you're putting out fires all the time. So it's something you do because hopefully you have the right motive, and I think that's what most of us are there for, and that's why I try to wake up and think about every day. Why am I there? Giving to the kids, number one. Spanish, kind of a distant second in my mind. I won't tell them that, but I want to be good people and be inspired and be more open perspective and think about the world, and be caring people and learn the verbs and vocab and stuff along the way. But it's more of a person first, and then Spanish second.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could hold you hostage here for another 5 hours though.
and he would complete like 2 marathons in that amount of time too.
He's like, all right, since we're going to talk, let me just go for a run.
Yeah.
To us.
Hey, let me ask you this before we let you go, and before we ask our last question, which I did not prep you for. I apologize for this, but the question I have before that is, do you ever plan on doing like an ultra marathon or anything like that? Have you done one?
That's a great question. So I have a lot of friends that are all in on the ultra marathons, and 26.2 is pretty hard, and I enjoy doing the trail stuff. So I don't know if I'll sign up for a really long race. The farthest I've gone is across the Grand Canyon and back in a day, which is just under 50 miles. And that was an incredible day. It's rim to rim to rim, they call it. South rim to the bottom, Phantom Ranch, to the north rim to the bottom, to south rim. And then I did a race in the Copper Canyon in Mexico, which is kind of the Grand Canyon of Mexico, with the Tarahumara. A lot of native people that run in their traditional outfits with sandals made out of tire tread. And it's a famous area in the Copper Canyon, Chihuahua, Mexico. That was about 50-ish miles too. So those are the 2 farthest days I've done. I don't know if I have that much of a desire to sign up and pay for a race. I'm more of the mindset, like quite a few of my friends are, that pick a route you want to do in Yosemite and the Sierras and the Grand Canyon, around Mount Rainier, wherever it is. Go do it with some friends, find a place to stay, fast pack it if you spend a night or 2 along the way, and pick a beautiful part of the country or world that you want to see. And doesn't necessarily have to be a race where you're rushing past incredible places, but you can stop and take pictures and do it on your own pace. So I'm kind of a little bit more of that mindset now.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I'm a huge GoPro fan, and I'm jealous of some of the stuff I've seen on your YouTube page. I'm like, well, I have nothing like that. Mine's like going down like a slide.
Well, there you go. Yeah, hopefully
Nice.
have this guy still kicking. But yeah, I take it all my trail runs and carry it, and literally have, I don't know how much footage that I've never even really looked at that I like to make more videos of. So yeah, GoPro is it's on me pretty much in every single trail run I do.
That makes sense. That's why they're designed the way they are. You can go everywhere with them. I love it. So the last question we have for you is the one that we ask everybody, and I feel really bad about not giving you this ahead of time because I feel like it's gonna be a tough one. Maybe not though. Maybe not. We call it our connection suggestion, and at the end of every episode, we like to ask our guests if they have a person, organization, a brand that they would suggest that our audience checks out. I'm sure you've connected with so many different things throughout your life. It's maybe this is an easy one for you. Maybe it's difficult. I apologize. But if you could pick one thing, what would be good for our audience to follow?
Person, organization, or brand? I think I've always connected kind of with people a little bit more than maybe organizations or brands. I
Okay.
kind of do a lot of things a little bit more independently. So I'm trying to think of who they should connect with or who has inspired me a lot. I'll throw out a guy who's kind of a friend of some of my friends as someone that's inspired me a lot. A guy named Drew Binsky has made videos from every country in the world, and some of my friends have traveled with him. I've been seemingly crisscrossing paths without ever having meeting him, but he's basically done what I've done in the last 10 or 15 years, but done it full time and made a video every single day, which is insane. Spending 8 to 16 hours a day editing videos of local people's stories from every country in the world. And I use videos in class as this is exactly what I saw. Maybe even the same person I stayed with, or that, like, literally, why is everything free in Pakistan? Like, I thought that. And then a month later, when he went there, he made a video on it. Like, why did literally every single person in Pakistan not let me pay for everything that I wanted to buy? And so he, dedicated himself and put in 1 billion hours. And now he has 2.8 million followers on YouTube and makes a full nice living on it, but chugged away making nothing, and tells local people stories from all over the world. I mean, there's an example of someone that literally has kind of lived the life that I have, but has spent the extra 14 hours a day, traveled 3 times slower maybe, and not taught along the way, and filmed pretty much what I've seen from every country in the world. So there's an example of kind of a friend of friends of mine that
Perfect.
gives you examples from all over the world of how good people are, local people's stories, inspiring stories, not just go here, go here, go here, but here's someone that's, lives in a tree house, or here's someone that, has done all these things while being handicapped. Here are the tallest people in the world in South Sudan. He tells local people's stories in kind of a nice way. Here's people who have escaped from North Korea and have made a life in other countries in the world. And he's a guy that I enjoy sharing his stuff in my classes pretty much on a weekly basis. So.
Perfect. So make sure you go follow Drew. And then Brian, where can they follow you? Your YouTube page, Instagram, website, all that stuff.
Yeah, so The World Hiker on YouTube, it's The World Hiker. It's going to be basically half travel things, half outdoor and trails and hiking, combining my two loves. So it's The World Hiker on YouTube. It's the.world.hiker on Instagram. And those are probably the 2 best places. Facebook, it's The World Hiker as well. And happy to answer questions, love sharing, and try to make videos, especially during the school year, maybe once a week. And then I'm out doing the things in the other 3 months of the year where we're not in class, but loading up with hopefully more footage and things to share to show people how good people are in the world and how many beautiful places there are when you get in the outdoors and spend some time in nature as well.
Sweet.
I love it. That's awesome. Deb, anything else before we get out of here?
Just keep us, keep in touch with us on our Instagram, and we'll be sure to follow you of your next travels and in your last 2 countries you said that you have to go to. We'll be on the lookout for those too.
Hopefully some point here, get to the last 2 and finish it off.
There you go.
I might reach out to you soon about Europe when I go in March.
Oh, and if you're going anywhere, if you're traveling anywhere, if you want ideas on hikes or anything I can help with in any of those areas, reach out. I'm happy to help.
Mine's going to be much more touristy than your experience is probably, but I'm still going to probably ask some questions. So
you have all the details instead of on air when you have nothing. So awesome, Brian. Well, thank you so much, and good luck and stay safe.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's been a
Absolutely.
pleasure. You guys, appreciate it.
Thanks for watching the show. If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you like it, share it, and hit the subscribe button to get a new episode every week. We'll see you next time on the Connectable Podcast.